Hey everybody, I'm coming to you live from an undisclosed location near this white wall because I'm afraid that I'm going to get pulled over by the cops if I go to school. So, I don't know about you, but right now I'm kind of sick and tired of this quarantine thing. Uh, I'm ready to be back in school. I never thought I would say that. What's fascinating to think about is how difficult this quarantine thing has been. And I think the reason is we've completely changed our normal way of life, that things aren't consistent. There's a lot of uncertainty right now, and I'm starting to feel it too. It was fun the first couple weeks, and now there's kind of the sense of, okay, when's this over? When can I get back to normal life? When is this going to stop? And we don't know. And with this, I want to think about that idea of stability, which is what St. Benedict's rule is all about. How do I live a stable life? And I think it's really applicable for all of us right now because life is not very stable. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of inconsistency, and we don't like it. So looking back at Benedict's life, he went through something similar to us. Not in that there's a giant plague in the world, but he grew up in modern-day Italy in the Roman Empire, but he was born and raised at the very end of the Roman Empire when everything was falling apart. In his days, Roman soldiers were no longer getting paid. The roads stopped being maintained, and it was very common for barbarians to come and invade, and you never really knew what was going to happen next. His whole early life was an unstable life, and he goes to Rome to study. And people are just taking this and saying, like, well, we're going to die tomorrow, so let's party today. And he's just unsatisfied by this. And so, as we saw in other videos, he goes and he leaves the city. He finds no stability, no peace, no comfort, no consistency in the city, and he tries to live on his own. Well, as I talked about in the last video, eventually a group of monks found him and wanted him to teach them his way. As we saw, he was very strict in his first way, but at the end of his life, after multiple attempts and starting actually 12 monasteries, he finally sits down and he writes his rule. And this is just a practical way of how to live together. So we're going to look at a couple excerpts from this to get at why is this rule that's 1,500 years old still used today and still applicable to us, especially right now in this time of uncertainty. So, looking at it, Benedict wanted his monasteries to model after the gospel. In a sense, this rule isn't supposed to be different than the gospels. It's supposed to be a practical application of the gospel. And so what he does is he looks at how Jesus and his apostles lived, and he says, how could we do this in today's time? There are a group of us all together who want to live together as a community. We want to live around prayer. We want to live for Christ. How do we do that? And how can we be practical about it? So his first and primary concern is stability. The best way to think about stability is to think, if I could be anywhere in the world right now, where would I be? And if you answer somewhere other than where you are, in a sense, you're not stable because you don't want to be where you are. You want to be somewhere else. And the reality is, if I want to be somewhere else, well, I go there and I want to be somewhere else. Because it was interesting before the coronavirus stuff, if you asked me where would I want to be, I'd say, oh, anywhere but, teaching in a classroom. It's nothing about you guys. It's just March and teachings, It's brutal for everyone. It's you guys. But no, right? You ask all of that and you say, where'd you rather be? And I say, I'd be somewhere else. But now I'm sitting here in 3 weeks into quarantine and you ask me and I'd be like, I would rather be teaching. But if you ask me when I'm teaching, it's like, oh, I'd rather be summer break. And then you find me in summer break and I'd be like, oh, I'd rather be here. Right? My life is not stable. I don't want to be where I'm at. And so Benedict wants us to get to a point where we want to be where we're at. One of the most unique things about the vow of stability is that monks actually vow to never leave their monastery. That when you make that vow of stability, you are making promises to the community itself. That you're saying, I'm going to live here the rest of my life. That I'm not going to look elsewhere. I'm not going to try and move. I'm going to be where I am at right now for the rest of my life. And I'm going to be happy here. And so the way he thinks that's going to happen is through obedience. And we think, obedience? Listening to someone else? No, I want what I want. But really think about that. Most of our life is just trying to fulfill what I want. I want it that way. And the reality is, not a lot of us are that happy. That living all this life trying to get what I want hasn't made me any more happier. And so what Benedict says is, if you just follow the whims of your will, if you just do whatever you want all day, you're going to be miserable. And so he has this kind of paradoxical insight that happiness is not found through doing what you want. It's through love, through willing the good of the other. And in that sense, to be obedient is to give up your life for another and say, this is no longer about me. I'm going to listen to what you will. So with that, Benedict, in all of his monasteries, assigns an abbot. Abbot, which comes from the word father. So he places a father figure over the entire monastery. Someone to follow, someone to be obedient to. And the idea of this is not so much that we should be following the will of another human, but the abbot is supposed to be a representative for Christ. So just as a bishop represented Christ for his community, the abbot would represent Christ also for his monastery. And so the quality of an abbot is really strict, where Benedict tells him that he's supposed to be Christ for the community, and so he shouldn't be favoring anyone, and his job is to not care about himself, but care for his sheep. So an abbot's probably the most difficult job in a monastery, and you would think, that's awesome to be a leader. Everyone does what you want. But the job of the abbot is not to do whatever you want. It's to give up your obedience to your whole community and say, I'm going to do whatever is best for all of the people under me. And so there's this mutual obedience where all of the monks give their will over to the abbot, and the abbot says, I'm going to take this and I'm going to do what's best for all of you, not what's best for me. And so he sets a really high bar for the abbot. And I got to know the abbot at St. John's a little bit in my time there. And Abbot John told me that it's pretty much impossible to live up to what Benedict thinks the abbot should be. But that's kind of the point, to set a high bar and to try and reach it. So then you think, okay, I want to start a community. I want to live together. We got to get into some practical matters. What are we going to do? Well, we're Christians and we want to follow Jesus, so we should pray. Well, how long? Well, Benedict says is, in community, prayer should be brief. Not that prayer should be avoided, but when we've come together for community, there are a lot of jobs, a lot of work we need to do, that prayer shouldn't be hours upon hours, because practically we can't pray for hours at a time. And so rather he says, we're going to pray multiple times throughout the day, but we're not going to pray too long. Because the idea is that the prayer then leads us into our work. And then while we're working, we're praying. In a sense, the whole life becomes prayer. That prayer and work become inseparable. So the next question is, all right, so we have a leader, the abbot. We're going to be praying multiple times a day, but not too long, so that we can also do other stuff. And that other stuff can, in a sense, become a type of prayer. The next question is, well, who's most important? Is it the abbot? And it's with this that Benedict does something really brilliant. And the place where I think he's brilliant is when he talks about the kitchen servers of the week. So in chapter 35 of the Rule of Benedict, he says, the brothers should serve one another. Consequently, no one will be excused from kitchen service unless he is sick, for such service increases reward and fosters love. Right? Kitchen service, preparing the meals and cleaning the plates and all that stuff after the meals seems like a very low task, that you should only save that for the lowest persons in the monastery. And what Benedict says is exactly, that's why everybody has to do it. That in a Benedictine monastery, nobody is actually ahead of anybody else. That practically the abbot actually has to do kitchen service at some point as well. That nobody's really better than another person. And another place I want to look at is in chapter 33, where he says that monks should not own anything privately to themselves. That again, they have given up their obedience, they've given up their will to another. In that same sense, they've given up their right to own anything else. Now, this is not an endorsement for socialism, because this is a group of 20 to 30 guys living together. But what he's saying is, when you've chosen to come here and live together, that we're going to be like the apostles, and we're going to all live communally together, that no one can own more than another. Because again, ownership tends to be a signal of importance, that if someone owns more things, we start to think they're more important. As we saw in the kitchen service, no one's more important than another person. Therefore, no one owns anything more. Everyone owns everything communally. So again, talking with the monks at St. John's, none of them own a car. Instead, the monastery has about 20 cars that you can use and sign up for, and you all communally pay for gas and things like that. And in fact, none of them have their own bank accounts. Everything is owned by the monastery. Now, the last thing I want to look at is actually the prologue to Benedict's rule. The first lines in this, he says, "Listen carefully, my son, to the master's instructions, and attend to them with the ear of your heart. This is advice from a father who loves you. Welcome it and faithfully put it into practice." That first word is the most important word in the entire Rule of Benedict. It is to listen. The purpose of the monastic life is to listen to the voice of God daily, through your community, through the sacraments, and through stability. Right now, it's hard to listen to anybody, because in this coronavirus world, we're all just kind of going crazy. At least I'm kind of going crazy, locked up in a house all day. And with that, it's actually really hard to listen to God's will. Right? I'm very not settled. And the purpose of this monastery is to give the monks a place, to give people a place to be stable, to settle, to just live a slow, peaceful life, and actually be able to listen, and listen carefully. Right? Listen to the others. When one of the brother monks corrects me, I don't get upset about it right away. I say, okay, I'm going to listen. There must be something here. There's a way I can get better. When the abbot assigns me to a job that I don't want to do, I slow down, I listen, I say there's something here. And so in a sense, right now, in this world of quarantine, the Rule of Benedict tells us to slow down and to listen. There's something here. God is trying to work through this. This is not a great time. This is not a fun time. But if we take Benedict seriously, stability calls us to want to be where we're at right now. So I'm going to invite all of you, and I'm going to invite myself to do the same, to really slow down the next couple of days and to take some of these words to heart. Part of your assignment is going to be looking at the Rule of St Benedict and some of the excerpts. But what I would encourage you is to actually try and practically apply them to your life. Is there a way that you can listen this week? Is there a way that you can become obedient to Christ? And through all this, know that we're all suffering together, and that I am praying for you guys. I hope that we get to see each other before the end of the year. Um, but if not, stay holy and stay healthy.